Thanks again for joining us on another edition of the show today. It's 19 February 2022. Today we consider the complexities of free speech, self-censorship and media regulation in Ghana. This week saw the arrest and detention of Oliver Barker-Vormawor, a CSO convener and NPP chairman for Bono Kwame Bafo, popularly known as Abronya DC. Previously, 4 journalists had been arrested and detained, charged using Act 29 of the Criminal Offences Act. So is it time to revisit the National Media Commission's Content Standards Regulation 2015, LI 2224, which was thrown out by the courts and deemed as an attempt to censor the media, deemed inconsistent with Article 1622 of the 1992 Constitution. So what next? How do we march on this potential monster that is using Act 29 of the Criminal Offences Act to chase perpetrators of free speech? Or is it an exaggeration? We also reflect on the dire state of rural education in Ghana, the struggles, the neglect within the context of education reform. TV3 has been driving an education reform series, and it has uncovered in plain sight such neglect that should be a blot on the conscience of education authorities and all of us as Ghanaians and as a country. We're live here on TV3 and 3FM 92.7. We're also live around the world at 3news.com, and you can follow us on our Facebook page and our Twitter page. It's TV3_Ghana, 3FM 92.7. And I hope to hear from you via our WhatsApp line. It's 055-369-8789. You can also tweet at TV3_Ghana, also at 3FM 92.7. You can also tweet at me at Beho Bampo, and I'll be happy to read your messages. Thank you very much for joining us, and you can follow the conversation. Just use the hashtag #TheKeyPoints. We take a quick break and we'll be back with our guests. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, this week has thrown up reflections about free speech, self-censorship and media regulation within the context of arrests of journalists and some CSO activists. Now, this accusation is that the police is being used as an instrument to gag critics and intimidate media and CSOs into submission. Last week, we saw the arrest and detention of Oliver Barker-Vormawor, who is a convener of Fix the Country movement. And then later that week, we saw the arrest of NPP chairman for Bono Kwame Bafo, popularly known as Abronya DC. And many have said that his arrest was due to pressure on the police because he had made his comments over the weekend and had not been picked up. Now, many have also decried how this has been approached, urging the use of civil means. But we are now reflecting on whether the NMC's content standards regulations should be looked at again. This was thrown out when Giba put forward a challenge in court, and it was deemed that the regulation was an attempt to censor the media and thus inconsistent with our constitution, which allows, freedom of expression and non-control of content. Well, should we look at that again? So what next? How do we march on this? What may be a potential monster using the criminal process to chase what may seem as people who are perpetrating free speech that is unacceptable? Or is it just an exaggeration? We'll come back to our guest shortly, but first let's hear the Speaker of Parliament, the Right Honourable Alban Bagbin, who's been speaking on this matter.
Oftentimes, in our quest as journalists to disseminate the information you have in a timely manner, to beat the deadline set for us, we make some mistakes. Our information at times do not turn out to be entirely accurate. We end up making some misrepresentations, at times impinging on the integrity and reputation of others. The media space and Ghana's legal regime for the media anticipated this and has prescribed a way out of this challenge. That is why We have the National Media Commission. And Parliament will need to focus on the National Media Commission. We need to urgently revise the law on the Media Commission to add some teeth and resources for the Commission to be effective. It's because of this challenge also that we have so many laws on media and free speech. As a lawyer myself, in the early days of my practice and also my parliamentary life, I was compelled to take a number of media houses to court using the rule of law, not the rule of man.
Act of the law. Thank you very much for staying with us on this. Our guest today, Suleimana Brahima, who is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. And in studio, we have Kwame Jantua, who is a lawyer and CPP leading member. Good morning to you both, gentlemen.
Good morning.
All right, so I'll start with Suleimana Brahima, who joins us on the line. So, Sule, you've written an article where you've criticized how all of these things have happened this week in reference to journalists as well as the view about free speech in the country. First, do you think that journalists, civil society activists, the way they're doing their work is coming under attack?
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me. I think that what we are witnessing now is a combination, is as a result of a combination of a number of factors. The first is what certainly is an increasing state of recklessness in our public commentary, recklessness in our media, and recklessness sometimes by our media organizations or some media organizations. But apart from that, we are also seeing a government that is quite intolerant, and the rampant application of pieces of legislation that our current president described as unconstitutional and had blamed the Atamil's government for using these laws in the manner in which it is being used rather rampantly now to check what he at the time said was to, undermine and hold robust media in check. And so I think that, yes, as a result of our toxic partisanship and the fact that we've gotten to a point where it appears the more abusive you can be, the more popular, the more loved you would be in your political party. That certainly is a problem. But of course, we are also seeing a government that is very, very intolerant and happy to apply these same laws that the president described as unconstitutional in order to hold critical public commentary and critical media in check.
Now, is it your view that this is bringing back the criminal libel law in a different way, knowing that that law was repealed by the president when he was Attorney General in the early 2000s?
Well, Jifa, I would say yes, because it mustn't necessarily be the name of a law. I think it's about the effect of the law. Criminal libel law was about a law that allowed the state to pursue criminal charges against persons who defame persons in public authority or persons holding public offices. What we are seeing now is the same thing. A law or laws that allow the state to pursue criminal charges against persons who make certain expressions that are deemed defamatory of persons in authority or persons holding public offices. Now, if you look at some of the incidents, for example, Bobie and first incident is in reference to an alleged acquisition of state property or state land by the First Lady. The Abronia incident is an alleged, whatever plans to stage a coup d'etat. The guy who has been jailed for contempt. I am told his incident was about an allegation that the president had met justices of our Supreme Court, and so on and so forth. And then of course the Asepa guy is about a claim that the presidential jet was used by the family of the president for a private trip. So all these are about allegations against public officials, and criminal charges are being pursued against these people, of course, on the basis of existing laws. But for me, I think the most important thing is the fact that these things are happening under the leadership of President Akufo-Addo. And if you had time, I will quote for you exactly what President Akufo-Addo said in 2011 in relation to the application of these laws in 2010 against a certain MPP activist by name Nana Dakwa-Bafi, who had alleged at the time that President Rawlings himself had set his house ablaze. If you remember that President Rawlings' official residence at some point, caught fire. Then there was the incident of the arrest of Ato Kwame Nadazi, your former colleague when you were at Multimedia, who was then the deputy editor also, and the police had picked him up because Joy FM had said that members of GRADA, the real estate association, had indicated that they had received threats for their opposition against the then state intervention to build houses, STX. And he was arrested, and the point was the police were saying they needed him to disclose the source of that information. And then there was the Amina Mohammed, or I think the name is Amina Mohammed, who had alleged that while traveling, they were ambushed by armed robbers, and the armed robbers, compelled passengers to have sex with each other on the road. Now, these three incidents were what happened, and the state was then applying the publication of false news as basis for the arrest and the prosecution of these three people. At the time, President Akufo-Addo said that, and I'm quoting him, he said in a speech on 4th August 2011, Pretoria in South Africa, and he said, if despite the repeal of the criminal and seditious libel laws, there remain arcane laws that continue to threaten media freedom in Ghana. He says this has become particularly apparent since the government of the National Democratic Congress assumed office in January 2009, after winning the 2008 general election. And here, listen to what he says. The rest of the convenient tools of criminal and seditious libel laws, the ruling government have had to comb through the criminal code and to seize upon the offense of offensive conduct conducive to the breach of the peace and the sinister offense of publishing false news likely to cause fear and alarm to the public. This is President Akufo-Addo speaking at the time of candidate Akufo-Addo. He goes on to say that desperate to keep in check robust media, the police first seized on this offense to invade a radio station to arrest a panel member who had alleged that, who had made an unsubstantiated allegation against former President Rawlings. The question one would ask is, if at the time it was wrong for the police to invade a radio station to arrest somebody who had made an unsubstantiated allegation. What is the difference now?
But
the police invaded Accra FM to arrest Bobie Ansah for making an unsubstantiated, and certainly, you know, of course, it's a matter in court, for making an allegation against the First Lady. So it's literally the same thing.
okay, but
So
Sule, but Mr. Garba, you keep referencing the things that Mr. Akufo-Addo said as candidate, and now he is president. Isn't it fair to consider that sometimes when you are not in the driving seat as president, things can be different? And also consider that at the time he repealed the criminal libel law, much as he was the Attorney General who did it, it seemed that this was probably driven by the president at the time, President Kufuor. So it may be that, yes, he acted on the orders of the president at the time, and much as he may have believed it, as president now, he may see things differently.
Well, Jifa, I hold the strong view that when it comes to matters of law, so long as the law hasn't changed, it is difficult to say you have changed your mind and acting differently. And I say so because I am not a lawyer. The president is a lawyer, and the circumstances surrounding his position is perhaps getting worse now. And the circumstances where the law hasn't changed, it is the same things that are being played out, instances of public expression, instances where people are saying things in the media. And look, Nana Akufo-Addo at the time had said that, yes, it is okay, it might be okay to have a law against publication of false news and so on, because there could be instances where such acts could lead to problems. But he says, even if the law would be applied, it must be applied under circumstances where there is a direct causal link between a problem that has happened and what somebody has said. And he goes on to cite an example that in a public gathering, if somebody were to shout, "Fire, fire," and then people run and in a stampede, people die and so on and so forth, yes, the law can be applied. But let me quote him to answer the question that you've just posed, where he says that the problem with our current false news law, this was in 2011, and the law remains the same, so it's as if it is now. The problem with our current false news law is that it is more directed at mere expression and the state of mind, namely fear and alarm, which in the best of worlds is difficult to determine. Then he goes on to state his personal view about this law that is being used now. He says that as the offense of publishing false news therefore currently stands, in my view, it is inconsistent with the constitutional provision on free expression, being overtly broad and accordingly not proportionate to the legitimate public interest that is being sought to be protected. I am saying that, yes, he is president now, so his circumstances has changed from being opposition leader to being the president. But the reality is that our quest for democracy hasn't changed. The law on false news and offensive conduct hasn't changed. And I believe that it would be a matter of, a deviation from principle for us to assume that it is okay to love freedom of expression, to love press freedom whilst you are in opposition, and to hate it when you are in government.
All right.
I don't think that we can seek to build a democracy by saying that, well, we love democracy, but we hate robust and critical commentary. And I am saying that, look, we cannot shift positions like that. If it was wrong then, it certainly must be wrong now.
Certainly. Thank you, Sule. Don't go off the line. Please just stay with us. Let me also let you know that you can send your WhatsApp messages to our phone line. That's 055-369-8789. You can also tweet at me at Beho Bampo, or you can send it to TV3_Ghana, 3FM92.7_Ghana, and tag me as well. Let me turn to Kwame Jantwa as well, who's a lawyer and CPP leader. And at least you've lived through quite the era from, you know, the 70s to the 80s
60s,
to the 90s.
70s.
It's amazing.
80s.
We are now in 2022.
Yeah,
so what are your thoughts? Is this a return to the criminal libel law through the back door?
Good morning to our viewers. And good morning to Sule, and to you. Jifa, I think it depends on the kind of utterance. So, for instance, if it's seditious, then I think seditious comments can be approached by the police. So, for instance, we give an example of the gentleman who has been arrested,
Oliver Barker-Vormawor, for allegedly saying he organized the coup
exactly.
himself.
That is seditious. The police can come in. But when you take the Bobie one, where he talks about the first lady and the second lady having land at cantonments, that one is up to the individual to decide, I'm going to, you know, take this person to court. Like Spiogabra and I think one of it was either Spiogabra and one of the journalists. So I think with regards to how we operate the law, it depends on what has been said. And if it's seditious, if it is something that can create panic in the community, then yes, the police have the right. The security service have the right to call you and ask you, where is your evidence?
Okay, so your thoughts are that what Mr. Barker-Vormawor had said is really entirely different from what journalists like Bobie,
totally
Captain
different.
Smart, and
Totally
co have
different.
said. All right.
Totally different.
Now we have Abronye DC, who accused former President Mahama of engaging in a manner that will be organizing a coup. How about that? Because the application then it's on a basic standard is not fair. Barker-Vormawor was arrested, like we see in the films, grabbed at the airport, unidentified, kept for 24 hours and more, not known where he was. Abronye, an invitation was extended to him, and this was after days when he had made the comments and criticism of the police was growing, and they extended an invitation to him. He now came before he was detained. Why extend such courtesy to a person when you didn't do that for someone else?
You see, the police should be very standard in the way they execute the law. Is it that Abronye, because he's an MCE, right?
Yeah, he's a MPP regional chairman.
MP regional chairman.
And he's politically exposed.
And it's the party in power. So you invite him, and Vormawor is not an MPP person. He has an institution that is fighting for a situation where government finds it irritating, fix the country, and because of that, you don't invite him and you go heavy-handed and arrest him. The police tactics should be fit for all. I don't see why they couldn't invite this gentleman, because Vormawor, he actually indicated in his Facebook post
that he was coming.
That he was coming. So we knew he was coming. Why don't you let him get here, get home, and then invite him to the police station for questioning, but use heavy-handed methods? I think the responsibility is not only on the police. The responsibility is on political parties. The responsibility is on the country as a whole to make sure that people understand the law and people can question the police. So, if you're coming to arrest me, do you have a warrant to arrest me? We should know that before anybody is arrested, the police should present a warrant. And on that warrant, it should state exactly why you are arresting me. I can resist arrest if you come knock on my door and say you are arresting me and you don't show me a warrant. Go to the developed countries and see what they do. If you do anything wrong, and even if they stop you on the streets, before they put you in the police van, they will tell you why they are putting you in the police van. Does that happen here? It doesn't. So I believe that the actions of the police should be such that they do it equitably, where everybody goes through the same process of arrest, and not favor one against the other. In the terms of what is it Abronye DC?
Kwame Bafo is his real name.
Was it a political gimmick he was
So,
trying to?
Even in his case, which is where there's the criticism, the police have determined in their preliminary investigations that what he claimed about former President Mahama is grossly untrue. It's not the first time he'd accused President Mahama in whatever shape or form. There are letters from Mr. Mahama's lawyer, Tony Litha, to the police asking for, or filing a formal complaint. So it begs the question then that this is clear falsehood, yet he's on bail.
Yes, clear falsehood, but the responsibility is also on President Mahama's side to also take him on in the civil courts. You're accusing me falsely. Should I wait for the police to act? When it's spoiling my credibility, when it's spoiling my integrity, when it's tainting me, I also have to act and take him on. Because it is not fair if he has done it once, twice, thrice, and the police have been notified by President Mahama's lawyers that this thing this person is doing is wrong, do something about it, and nothing's being done about it. I've got to take the mantle and go to the courts and hold him responsible and show me the evidence that I, President Mahama, was trying to commit a coup in this country. We also have that responsibility. The law is on our side to also take it to court. The court is open for everybody.
For that would be a civil matter, isn't it?
It would be a civil matter.
It would be a civil. So therein lies the general criticism that there are civil options to deal with some of these things that have come up in reference to even journalists and some of the civil society leaders, like the ASEPA's Mensa Thompson. Why should the police pursue a criminal process when there are laid down processes in the Constitution?
Is it depending on what it is? Depending on what it is. If it is something that is seditious, if it is something that can create,
we cleared that up with Oliver.
If it is something that can create fear and panic, then yes, the police and security service can come in. But if it is something that is personal between two people, I don't see why the police should come in. If the police come in, it makes it look as if they are acting on behalf, or they've been prompted by a third party to do what they are doing. It makes it look that way. And that is why, we would say it is the government who is creating this kind of pressure on police to arrest the individual who has said the First Lady and Second Lady have bought land in cantonments. It's a private matter. Because if it goes to court, the person who said it will have to show evidence. The court will ask him, where is your evidence? And if he's able to show evidence, it will continue and go to court, and then we will see whether it is true or it's not true. Because there's a judge, there are two lawyers who are standing for the two offenders, or the two people, and it will be argued in court. And so it still boils down to what the comment is and how offensive the comment is to the general population and to the individual. Because we've had situations where individuals have taken the civil route and taken people on for saying things that are libelous to their own personality.
Let's now turn back to Sule. Sule, if you are still with us, I'd like to ask, though, do you get a sense that the treatment of Oliver Barker-Vormawor, the CSO convener for Fix the Country, and the NPP's Bono chairman, Abronye DC, whose real name is Kwame Bafo, do you see inherent discrimination in it, or their circumstances or their commentary is different?
Well, I think that I would say that in the case of Oliver, he says that he is going to stage a coup himself. In the case of Kwame Bafo, he is accusing someone of planning to stage a coup. So the two can be said to be slightly different. In the case of Kwame Bafo, it's an allegation of a crime that is intended to be committed by someone. So assuming what he is saying or what he said is true or was true, it's something that the state agencies can then decide to pick up to investigate and say, okay, this was a useful information that led us to something that was about to happen. In the other instance, it's about somebody saying, look, I am going to do this. And if that is interpreted to be an intention to commit crime, I think the instances are different. We may then be talking about how the police went about the arrest and whether or not there was discrimination in terms of, in one instance it was about indication and the other instance was about arresting the person directly on his arrival at the airport. But for me, I don't think that that's even something so substantial to talk about, whether somebody was invited and the other person was arrested. At the end of the day, when Bafo reported himself or honored the invitation, he was arrested and detained and then taken to court. So for me, that is not a very big issue to deliberate on. I think what is important is whether what is happening is good for our democracy or detrimental for our democracy. As I said earlier, I acknowledge that there is so much reckless speech, unprofessional conduct in the media and sometimes by sections of the media. And certainly by saying that the rampant application of the law on false publication and offensive conduct isn't something that is good for our democracy, is not an endorsement of what has been happening in terms of the reckless speech and their potential consequences for our democracy. But I think that as a country, we need to look at how do we respond to this emerging trend without the needless application of a law that invariably criminalizes expression and speech, which then undermines the whole essence of freedom of expression in democracy. Now, I think that we as a country have failed over the years to plan, to respond to the evolution of the media landscape, including the emergence of social media and other platforms that allow space for people to comment and space for people to express themselves, which by itself is good. But being a human society, we needed to have thought about it. That look, if we just allow the thing to be as it is, just as there are criminals in society who would commit crime all the time, there are people who would abuse the process and end up causing trouble for all of us. And that is why I am surprised that 3 decades on, we haven't been able to craft a law that would, for example, empower the National Media Commission to be an efficient and an effective institution. That is why it is surprising that 2 decades on, as a country, we have been, playing with the broadcasting bill. It's been on and off, back and forth, as though it doesn't matter in the scheme of things. That is why it is surprising that for almost 3 decades, we still have a National Communications Authority that has the liberty to just parcel out frequencies without anyone being concerned about the recipients of these frequencies and whether or not they truly have the capacity to set up broadcast media outlets that would do professional work. That is why it is surprising that for almost 3 decades, We have a National Communications Authority that continues to issue frequencies without transparency, without people getting to know who are being given the frequency. And indeed, what we have is when NDC is in power, NDC executives, NDC, party functionaries are the ones who get the frequencies to set up radio stations. And these stations are set up for mainly partisan propaganda rather than the business of journalism. It is the same when the MPP is in power. They get frequencies to set up radio stations to do propaganda for the party rather than the business of journalism. And then we turn around and cry that there is so much recklessness in the media and by practitioners in the media.
But isn't that something to be addressed, that practitioners who should probably invest in training, even if it's themselves, who should aspire to high standards, should not engage in reckless commentary? Should that not be said, that all of us have a responsibility as practitioners to demonstrate the highest standards, and certainly being reckless or making unsubstantiated comments, it's not a reflection of high standards?
Well, see, the reality is that the people who are reckless, it isn't the case that they are unaware that they are being reckless. The reality is that people have used that as their claim to fame. People have gotten positions as a result of being abusive of opponents. And when their party comes to power, they find themselves low. And therefore, there is a motivation for people to be reckless. There is a political motivation for people to be reckless. The other thing is that, look, as you know, we go around doing training for journalists. As I speak to you, from Monday to Friday, we had a training program for selected journalists from Greater Accra. There was this ongoing program for those in Northern Region and another ongoing program for those in Asante Region. On countless occasions, we have been told, in the course of these trainings, that, look, we are learning a lot, and these are journalists speaking, we are learning a lot, but the reality is that a lot of the things that we are learning here, when we go back to our media organizations, we cannot put them into practice for a number of reasons. Either we don't have the logistical support to be able to deliver, or our owners wouldn't allow us to do the critical thing that we have to do based on what we are learning from here. Let me give you a critical example. In ahead of the 2016 elections or so, we dispatched a team of persons that we call the Eminent Media Persons Group to Kumasi to meet with the management of Ash FM. And Ash FM is owned by Honorable Kenneth Japon. Now, this delegation included Nana Kosi Janapinsing, who was the chairperson or the chairman of the National Media Commission then. Dr. Doris Dati, the late Dr. Doris Dati, who was a member of the NNC. Ajwa Yebuafari, who was then the president of Editors Forum Ghana. Professor Amin Al-Hassan, an accomplished academic, who is currently the Director General of GBC, and Professor Kwame Kakari. And of course, I was part of it because it was a Media Foundation delegation. We went to SFM because a lot of abuse was happening on that station ahead of the election, and it could cause trouble for the country. In the course of the conversation, the managers of the station told us in plain language that yes, we know about the ethics, we know about the need to be civil, decorous, and so on and so forth. But he spoke in peace, turning for elders. What I can tell you is that for us, it's about how we bring our party to power, because our owner has an interest, and we must pursue that interest. And we are in Kumasi, Asante region, they love MPP. If we will do what we have to do for them to follow us, that is what we will do. And eventually, that is how the meeting ended. So what kind of training can you give to journalists who operate from these partisan outlets for them to say, okay, we imbibe it and we go ahead? Like I told you, people have been abusive, and that has been their claim to fame. They've gotten positions as a result of being vitriolic and abusive. So there is motivation for others. So we cannot be indirect sponsors of these kinds of acts and then publicly come out to condemn them or pretend that there are things that we don't endorse. I don't want to name names, but otherwise, on both sides of the divide, MPP and NDC, people have gotten positions because what they did was that they were abusive. There are people who have gone to jail for misconduct against top-level people, including justices of the Supreme Court. Today, they are holding executive positions in their parties.
Okay.
And so that's the problem.
All right. So, Sule, I'll come back to you because I want us to explore the bit about legislation for the NMC, because there was one they did put together, but it was thrown out. And then, of course, I know the broadcast law has been pending for the last 25 years. And let me come to Mr. Jantwa. And let me ask specifically about these legislations the police are using. Okay, you wanted to make a point first. Go ahead.
I'm not sure whether you're going to include what I'm reading here. It's on the Criminal Procedure Act. Now, this particular clause 10, it says, any police officer may, without an order from a court and without a warrant, arrest any person whom he suspects upon reasonable grounds of having committed a felony or a misdemeanor. Who determines the reasonable grounds? This particular clause in the law, is it creating the type of actions we are seeing by the police? Because he does not need to go to court. Remember earlier, I indicated that for a police officer to arrest you, at least he should have a warrant. But the law is saying that
they don't necessarily
need a warrant.
They can hold you and proceed with
investigation. But then, on what grounds can he say you have caused this felony, you have caused this misdemeanor? So
which is the other thing I wanted to add then, that the sections in the Electronics Communications Act and then, of course, in the Act 29 of our Criminal Offences Act 1960, should we begin to look at whether these remain on the statute books? Because for many years, obviously, we were particular about criminal libel law and the laws of sedition, and that was repealed also because the mood globally was moving a certain direction. So if you didn't repeal it, you were deemed intolerant, you were deemed, somebody who didn't appreciate free speech, transparency, openness, and that kind of thing. Should we begin to look at this and probably take steps to expand?
You see, we should begin to look at all our laws because life is dynamic. And if we've had the law since 1960 and life has moved forward, especially right now we have social media. We didn't have social media, 30 years ago. And if laws that have been done 30 years ago still pertain today, yes, we should look at the law and see how it fits in today, because things are moving fast. Look, right now we have AI. We have so many technological things that some of our laws haven't caught up with. And I think it is something we should look at to see how best we can bring our laws to what is happening in the world today. I mean, social media at the present moment, what kind of laws are in there to be able to hold somebody responsible? Because, look, COVID, what happened? What didn't we hear on social media, especially with the vaccine? Some were saying it would create cancer in your body. Some were saying it would do that. It created some kind of false news in there. Were we able to do anything about it? Were we able to arrest the people? So the laws that we have today should be fit for purpose. And yes, I believe we should look at the laws again and see how best we can tighten it and make it better. Because people without laws that are strong enough would go out and say anything they want to say.
Okay, so that's one bit, but then there's the criticism about how the police also are being purportedly used. Because if I'm an ordinary citizen, I'm a camera person in this company, and someone defames me, will the police go after the person using the same criminal processes?
Well,
or is this only for the elite, the powerful, the politically exposed?
Is it the elite? I think more is for the politically exposed. Because if I'm a very rich man and somebody defames it, the police won't come and act on my behalf and go and arrest the individual.
Well, if you are rich and you have money, maybe they will.
Well, they will do that if I use my money to, push them to do it. But they won't get up and say, oh, they've defamed Kwame Jantua, so let's go and catch this person.
Well, you are notable, so hopefully they will.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But you see these things happen with governments who are in power. So the MPP is in power. They've said something against an individual who is a prominent person in the MPP. The police get up and they go. Who gives them that order to do that? That is what we don't know. And it would be great if the police can come and sit on your platform and say, look, this is the process we take in hearing false news, in trying to, act on the law of somebody causing a felony or misdemeanor based on the grounds we feel that the person has caused a felony and misdemeanor. These are the processes we take so that we all understand and not perceive that there's somebody behind pushing them and saying, go arrest this person for what they've said. I think the police are there, and remember, and I keep saying this, the police isn't a police force. The police is a police service. They are there to serve the people. And so it is up to them to try as much as possible to ease their processes for people to understand so that we get confidence in the police. And that is the key word, having confidence in the police to act according to the law and make sure that the people that they are serving have the confidence that they will do the right thing.
Let me read some text messages, and I'd like to come back to you, Mr. Jantua, before I come to Sule on the issue of legislation or content regulation by the National Media Commission. This message from our Facebook page from Emmanuel Sunday, it says, but why is it that the police are always the maltreatment tool in our country? And to be fair, I did request a representative from the police service, and they could not respond in good time to indicate whether they'll be here from this program or not. That's why they are not here, but we did make an effort to get to them. This one from Jacob Police, it says, Madam, the government should know that in truth, intimidation cannot win, and so they should stop arresting people. This one from Akusomu Kukrantumi. If you think that what Abronye said is not true, then former President Mahama should take him on instead of the police arresting him. Tando Joseph says, Mr. Jantua must also know that we were in this country when some youth demonstrated against the then President Mills for releasing plots of land to the then former President Kufuor for his office. Well, that's different. He was entitled to have that land after leaving office to set up his office. This one from Kwame Sapong says, it's very interesting why the host is not addressing the issue of reckless journalism. I hope that we've addressed that for you, Kwame, because we raised that with Mr. Sule Garba. And some of you still sending on WhatsApp. This one from Rex in Spintex. I find it reprehensible when journalists attribute the repeal of the criminal libel law to Nana Akufo-Addo instead of former President Kufuor. This was part of the hype given to the president, which has now led to an abysmal performance, which we are now seeing. Kizito from Tema East, good morning. What's the essence of repealing the criminal libel law, which this government has made so much noise about? What was Mr. Akufo-Addo's comments on Nana Konadu Rawlings when someone accused her of grabbing state property? The police must also stop being seen as being political and rather do things professionally and not in the bidding of a political party. The president and the vice president must put Ghana back on track and stop these diversionary tactics. AU from Tamale. Why are we now living in a culture of silence? The freedom of speech on journalists during this current NPP administration is very worrisome. From Garba in Tamale, I'm sad for Ghana. If people are glorifying false news and wicked lies for personal gains, then such people must be made to prove what they say. People must be made to be responsible. for their actions. Moses from Nkwanta from the Oti region. I think the police and government must allow individuals accused of wrongdoing to take the matter up and not the police. In the case of Mr. Vomawo, he should have known better, but I think he wrote those words out of frustration. So government should not take his comments as World Cup. And a final comment from Musa Abatwa in Kumasi. Jifa, the issue of media freedom and the ability of journalists to be able to do their jobs without fear or favor has been in tatters recently following the killing of Ahmed Swale and the arrest of 4 journalists by members of national security forces. And the final one, and he mentions their names, Emmanuel Ajafor, Abugre, and Emmanuel Brichum, who work for Modern Ghana, and then Bobby Ansa, who works with Accra FM. Then we also have here Captain Smart of Media General, and one of our other colleagues as well in the Western region, Nana Jetua, who was assaulted as well. And those were some messages. So the Media Commission tried to set up legislation, the National Media Commission Content Regulation, Content Standard Regulation 2015. It was thrown out by the courts because it was deemed to be inconsistent with media freedom, options in the Constitution and the like. Is it time to revisit the content standard regulations then?
Jifa, I think before we even go into that, I think every media house has a responsibility. So if I come and say...
Whether they are partisan or not?
Yes, whether they are partisan or not. But unfortunately, we have given licenses to political parties, as Garba rightly said, to use as propaganda tools for our party. But if I come and sit on your platform and I make disparaging comments, you have the right as the host to walk me out. You have that right. You have to ask me, Mr. Janto, where is your evidence for what you said? And if I can't prove it, walk me out for everybody to see. And then from that point on, we can see that the media houses too are taking responsibility. Too many times, you find people come and sit on media platforms, say whatever they want to say, and that particular media platform is quiet. Sometimes they even contribute and even urge them on to say more because they feel it creates a good atmosphere for the program. But it's wrong. It creates these types of challenges we're talking about today. Now, with regards to legislation, I'm not sure whether you have it here. I don't know. I
don't have the full
I don't know
here.
what the content was that the court based its argument on to throw it out. If we know what that content is, and if that content was not in line with the Constitution, was not in line with some of our laws, then maybe they were right to throw it out. But the fact that they've thrown it out doesn't mean that we shouldn't revise it.
Do we need it?
Why not? But what is happening? It should be done in such a way that when it is being implemented, it's not being implemented in a way that creates a certain atmosphere that doesn't align with our Constitution. Because the Constitution is the prime law in this country. But we should look at it again. We should look at it and see what is in that document, in that kind of legislation, that would help us for people to be able to have freedom of speech. But everybody in this country has a responsibility to what they say. Freedom of speech comes with responsibility. In the developed countries, yes, there's freedom of speech, but you have to be very careful what you say, because they will come after you. They will ask you the questions. They will say, show me your evidence. We've seen it in the British parliaments over and over and over and over again. So what is different from here? And you see, because we do not tend to implement the laws and people don't know the laws on a wider scale, people come up and say all sorts of things. And we can be reckless. The recklessness of our comments does not help us because we feel we are saying it to support our political party.
Mr. Barma raised the critical issues. If you're in an environment where people are allowed to own media, politically exposed persons, people within government and in the opposition political parties, and like he said, they tried to engage, and look at the response they got. That for them, their main agenda is the the interests of their party?
You know, I'm a bit I'm a bit sorry for the fact that when the current government came into power, especially the president, and the way in opposition he was pushing freedom of speech and trying to eliminate any challenges the media would face. I'm a bit, sad that he hasn't been able to push it forward, that particular issue, especially on the basis of political leaders and political exposed people having radio stations. And even
is that wrong?
Even, but
should they?
Because they've used it as a tool to one criticize unduly, use it as a tool to make sure that they have some word that they can stand on to chastise the opposition. And for me, it's got to do with the back and forth between, unfortunately, and I say the media have created this duopoly in this country, between MPP and NDC. You have a radio station, you can say what you want. We have a radio station, we can say what we want. That shouldn't be the case, because of all the politicians we have in this country, who put them there? It's the people who put them there. So the people are the most important tool within this whole embrace of the politicians we have today. And I don't think, and probably you would say it's discriminatory if you say that political figures can't have media houses. I don't see it as discriminatory, because you have a platform even as a politician in power. You have Parliament, you have the executive to express some of the things that you do. And most of the things that are said are based on the actions of the political party in power. And yes, how the opposition also handles the political party in power. There are certain things that I believe shouldn't be politicized. But we politicize it to an extent which now comes to affect the people you are serving. And I think those things should be looked at, because we need to build the nation Ghana. We do not need to build a political party CPP. The nation Ghana comes first before building a political party CPP. And if that political party now takes the place of the nation building, then we are in trouble. Because everybody then feels that we have the power to do and say anything. We come before the nation Ghana. And that is wrong. And so we need to look at how we handle the media in terms of who owns what is the person's objective of owning the station, is the station there to create a certain atmosphere that would help politics move forward in the way of developing our nation, or it is there to draw back and create uncertainty and uneasiness within the general public. That is wrong. But I believe the first point of call, apart from legislation, is the media station itself, to make sure that nobody comes and sits on, whether it is MPP-led, NDC-owned, CPP-owned, nobody should come and sit on the media house and profess things that are untoward, that create fear and panic in society.
All right, and it's the key points here on TV3. It's also on 3FM 92.7. You can send your WhatsApp messages to 055-369-8789. You can also tweet at me at Beho Bampo, also at TV3_Ghana and 3FM 92.7. Let's just take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with Mr. Sule Garba, who is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, and also in studio we have Kwame Jantwa, who is a lawyer and CPP leading member. We'll be right back. Thank you very much for staying with us here on the Key Points, and many thanks to you for your messages. Sorry, I've been calling Suleimana as Suleimana Garba. That's my mistake. It's Suleimana Brima. So just to correct that before we continue. Some of you have sent your messages also on Twitter, so let me read them. Ilyasu from Tamale says, comparing Oliver's declaration of coup to that of Abronye's allegations is like comparing apples with yams. One alleges and has to prove. One was definite and went to praise coup makers in Africa lately. Let's call out such unproductive bunch for punishment. This one from Deruga. If we really want to have sanity and professionalism among our security officers with regards to their conduct and action towards civilians, then we should make diploma qualifications as one of the baseline qualifications for recruitment into the service. I'm not sure if it's just about paper qualifications. It's about what the values of the institution are and being able to uphold that. This one from Baba Chairman. It will be naive for anyone to suggest that, quote, there is an attack on media freedom, end quote. Rather, it is the miscreants in the media landscape who are to be dealt with. Freedom of speech is not and cannot be loose and unguarded comments or statements. Thank you all for your messages on WhatsApp, on Twitter, and on our Facebook page. You can send some more. So let me now go back to the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleimana Brahima. So, Sule, let's talk a bit about the NMC legislation you referenced earlier. You indicated that it's a disappointment that there's nothing like that. You've also indicated there's a disappointment that there's no broadcast law. Now we have to even think of a law that is not just about broadcast, but social, digital media. Should we revisit what the NMC tried to do with its content standards regulation, which was thrown out by the court following an application by Giba?
Well, I think that I would start by saying that speech, expression, public commentary, and so on are a critical day-to-day element of human behavior. And it is for good reason that we have laws that are supposed to regulate human conduct and human behavior. And to that extent, given that speech and expression and so on are all part of human behavior, we need some sort of regulation to guide that. I must then say that what we need as a society is not just laws, but good law. And good laws are those that serve the interest of the masses and not to protect the interest of a few or certain individuals. Now, if you take the NMC's Content Regulation Standards Law, LI 2224, that they attempted to bring in as a mechanism to help deal with the growing state of unprofessional conduct in our media, it was, I believe, well intended, but certainly there were elements in that LI that were, definitely not in line with our Constitution. And I think that the Supreme Court did throw out that piece of legislation for good reasons. First of all, there were elements that bordered clearly on censorship. My good friend George Sapon, the Executive Secretary of the National Media Commission, would disagree, but certainly there were elements that, bordered on censorship, to the extent that the NMC in that legislation would have then had to vet and approve content before they are aired. There were also elements or pieces of, conditions or clauses in that particular LI that also sought to criminalize certain activities in the media. So, for example, if you failed as a media organization to present your content outline for approval prior to airing, you then committed a crime that you could be punished by either a fine or imprisonment or both. And in the wisdom of the Supreme Court justices, that amounted to reintroducing the criminal libel law through the back door, because in the end, people can end up being prosecuted by the state and being jailed for offenses that are committed in the media. And as I said, that is why I also have a problem with the fact that People are still being prosecuted with the possibility of being jailed with a law that is not supposed to be called criminal libel law, but still has, still has the same effect. So what we need are good laws, not just laws. And indeed, we do need laws. Look, as far back as 1993, in March 1993, there was a convening by experts, academics, legal people to brainstorm and think about the future of private broadcasting in Ghana. This was 1993 in March. That is just 2 months after our constitution came into being. And at that time, we hadn't even gone through the liberalization of the airwaves yet. We had only GBC television and GBC radio at the time. But people thought ahead and said, look, there was a need to begin to think about the future of broadcasting in Ghana. And in that deliberation, the late Justice D.K. Afre presented a paper in which he said, given that the Constitution provides unfettered freedoms for the media, including the fact that, one, there would not be the need or requirement to obtain a license before establishing a media organization. Two, just editors cannot be punished for their views or opinions. Three, the editors and media organizations shall not go through any form of control or censorship by anyone, and so many more. It was almost inevitable that there was a need to have a piece of legislation that would deal with the constitutional and the democratic requirements of sanity within the broadcasting sphere. And therefore, the National Media Commission that was yet to come and Parliament have a responsibility to ensure that the relevant pieces of legislation would be put in place to ensure sanity in our airways. This was 1993. Next year will be 30 years, and still we haven't responded to that. The NMC has a cardinal obligation to examine what is happening today and provide an appropriate response by way of legislation, and I would say a good legislation, not one that would have elements of censorship and elements of criminalizing media offenses and so on and so forth. Apart from that, Ghana is perhaps maybe the only country where we have two institutions, one that is supposed to be dealing with content and managing and regulating content, and another that is just battling out frequencies. So we give out frequencies, and however they are used for, that is not our business. I think it is time for the granting of frequencies to be made a responsibility of the National Media Commission, even if they don't have the technical capacity to be able to manage the frequencies and so on and so forth of our country, in terms of the ultimate decision of saying, yes, frequency must be given, or no, it must not be given. That responsibility should be given by law to the National Media Commission. Again, the Commission should have the power to be able to sanction, to be able to say, look, we are recommending to the National Communications Authority to withdraw the frequency authorization for this particular station or for this particular television station. Until we get to that, we will just be deceiving ourselves. I think Mr. John Trump made the point that media organizations must also know that they have a responsibility and need to be decorous, need to be civil, need to be professional on their airways. The truth is that what they do is what they set out to do. It's not as though it is, out of lack of knowledge or lack of awareness of what must be done. So if you say that, look, the radio stations must ensure that people who come on their stations say things that are right and so on and so forth, I'm sorry. They bring people that they know will come and say the wrong things. Mm-hmm. They bring people that they know will come and say things that would, inure to the benefit of their political party. And therefore, if it is about abusing the president or abusing the former president, so that they will be hailed as the champions of agitation, champions of activism, champions of abuse, champions of propaganda in their political party, that is what they will do, and that is what the stations would invite their people to come and do. So it is not as though they don't know, they know. And they deliberately do it. But we are in a situation where, as the NCA did, the only thing you can do is to politically decide to close radio stations that are aligned to the opposition party, which for me is not the way to go, like the NCA did. Politically motivated closure of opposition radio stations. That is poisonous for our democracy. Because if another party comes and decides to do the same thing, we would not be marching forward. We would rather be getting backward. The right thing to do is to have good laws implemented fairly, implemented equitably, so that radio and media would serve the purpose that they are supposed to serve in a democracy. I have always said, the kind of recklessness in our media, the unprofessionalism in our media, is perhaps the most potent threat to press freedom. Because invariably, that is what gets the masses to mistrust the media, to lose confidence in the media, and the support that we need from them, which is critical for press freedom, is then lost. So we need law, institutions must work, we in the media must act responsibly. We shouldn't just be parceling out frequencies to partisan people who would do reckless things. And finally, the political parties, the NDC and the MPP, must stop hailing persons who can abuse, must stop rewarding people who can insult, must stop seeing vitriolic propaganda as an instrument for political success, and begin to focus on, genuine communications that are about the future of this country, the communication that will convince people about the right things to do and all of that. Other than that, we are in trouble. And even if we have the laws and the parties decide that what is good for them is that we must attack each other, we will continue to have this conversation, and perhaps we will to what we are witnessing.
Just a quick one, Sule, before you go. The Fourth Estate, which is a project the Media Foundation runs, has been using the RTI law in an attempt to get critical information for its work or for some of the items that it's pursuing. I'm just wondering, isn't that an alternative avenue for journalists and citizens to use if they are not sure about some information or other?
No, absolutely. I think that over the period, the Fourth Estate, my colleague, at the Fourth Estate, have demonstrated the value of the right to information law. We have requested for information on several occasions, some of which we get, others we don't. Petitions are filed at the RTI Commission, and we have had decisions from the RTI Commission that have been so progressive and so favorable. So yes, it is an avenue that journalists can use, and so far a lot of material has been obtained that I believe in the coming weeks and days you will see the Fourth Estate, putting out content that are really helpful for public discourse and for public debate about the utilization of our resources and so on and so forth.
Sule, should we be worried that the RTI Commission will continue to be, as you've termed them, progressive? How do we not know that in the months or years ahead, this progressive outlook that they've presented will change?
Well, it is difficult to project into the future conduct of the Commission. At this stage, I think that they've demonstrated that they are asserting their independence and they are making the law to work. I believe what they need is the support from the public, the support from all of us. That would then allow them to be able to withstand any sort of pressures that would push them towards deviate from how they have started. The other thing that I am worried about is that I learned, and I believe him to be true, that the Executive Secretary of the RTI Commission is one of the President's nominees on the National Media Commission. And if it is true, it is something that is quite worrying that we need to look at, because If, for example, we file an RTI request to the National Media Commission and the Commission thinks that they don't have to disclose it and we have to go to the RTI Commission, then we are going to, an institution that is headed by somebody who serves on the National Media Commission. I think that is a very little thing that we can look at going forward. But as I made the point, it is not for lack of the capacity or lack of the sources of information that gets journalists and media presenters to act sometimes the way they do. It is just the political motivation and people wanting to be hailed, people wanting to become heroes. I believe that there are some who even feel that, yes, this my arrest and detention for saying things that are reckless is invariably even making me popular, and so on and so forth.
All right.
And I believe that if our parties stop rewarding the trollic commentary and abuse of each other, we may begin to see some changes in the current political dynamics.
Thank you very much, Suleiman Brima, Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Very insightful having you. So I'll give you the final bits, Mr. Jantwa. So you can box everything together, RTI, everything.
I was going through the Constitution, Chapter 12, Freedom of Independence of the Media, when we were talking about political affiliates having a radio station. And I looked at Clause 5, and it states, all agencies of the mass media shall, at all times, be free to uphold the principles, provisions, and objectives of this Constitution, and shall uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people of Ghana. How does a radio station that is owned by a political affiliate be able to do this? Especially the last bit, which says, uphold the responsibility and accountability of government to the people of Ghana. It's going to be very difficult. So if the MPP today are doing something that is untoward, and somebody in the radio station who is a supporter and a member of the MPP, how do they hold the government responsible for the wrong thing they are doing? And that goes against the Constitution, doesn't it? And so,
but isn't it too late? Because a lot of the frequencies, it's common knowledge, are owned by politicians or people in office and people who, are leading members of political parties on both sides. It looks like that the horse has, bolted out of the stables.
This is where we need a leader to come and sanitize the system. And say, irrespective, Ghana comes first. And we have realized that political parties that have radio stations, if they are not using it to the benefit of the people, we take them out. And let Nanado try it, and you see.
He will face resistance.
He will face resistance, but the mass of people in this country will support him. The mass of people in this country will support him. Because
but isn't it also the case that people like to hear such, outrageous debate and commentary?
We should change the trajectory because it's not helping us. Things that don't help us, we shouldn't promote. Because the sad thing is that as we peter out and the young ones take over, they are in that same trajectory, which is not helping. It's not helping us anyway. But in all, I believe to sanitize the system, most of these commentaries that we are hearing, some are out of frustration of what is happening in the country
or
economically.
maybe it's to test the government.
It could
maybe
be.
It is to test the government if they are truly the apostles of free speech. Because if there is nothing that has surprised me in the last 3 weeks or so, is that members of the NDC who come from a history of revolutionary, history or background from the 80s, who were the whipping boys when it came to free speech, intolerance, and all that, are now the apostles of free speech. And it seems the apostles of free speech from prior to 2000 and even the early 2000s now seem to be the ones who seem to look like they are intolerant and unwilling to accept dissenting views.
And what is creating it? What is creating it is the system that we have created in governing the country. And for me, one of the major issues of any political party is to listen. To listen to the people, because it is the people who put you there and expect you to act in a way that brings harmony. And so, people are saying we don't want e-levy. They've proffered arguments against it. Government should take a step back and listen. Yes, we are in a challenging situation, no two ways about it, both internally and also externally. What is it that we can do if our people are saying what we're bringing in is not acceptable? How do we make it acceptable? How do we get the views of others? Because for me, yes, government says, and this is not an e-levy discussion, but it feeds in to some of these challenges we face. Government is saying that we cannot do anything if we do not pass this. But you're doing town hall lectures. Open it up. Don't concentrate it only on one thing. Open it up. And when I say open it up, give the different opportunities that are there for us to look at. So, this is what we get in terms of revenue coming in. This is what we can do in terms of exemptions. This is what we can do in terms of XYZ. At the end, we still have a shortfall of this. And if we can even look at e-levy and say to ourselves, okay, we are prepared to come down on the e-levy to an acceptable rate for a certain duration of time, probably till the end of the year. And we would bring back things like the tolls, expand the tolling, raise the rates, and also draw money in. Have the discussion with the people, for the people to say, okay, we can do this, we can do it that way, but not talk at us and threaten us in the sense of saying that if we don't get this, we are doomed. It's wrong.
So all of that is just generating the frustration.
All of that generates the frustration
in the public
space. And it makes it look as if government is doing nothing. And what even compounds it is when expenditure of government seems to be still rocketing high in how they handle their own individual expenses with government travel and co. And the people feel that we are sitting on living on 20 cedis a day. Why are you paying $15,000 for an aircraft? It's the listening. We have to be able to lower the temperature and bring the people in so that the people feel part and parcel of it. At this present moment, they don't feel it. At this present moment, I don't think the opposition too are trying their best to bring the type of solutions that would help us to sanitize the system. Because where we are now, with regards to our finances, is dire. No two ways about it. It's dire. But we have to be able to do something about it. Look, these petrol prices are going up. Do we not have a windfall with regards to our export of crude oil? What was the benchmark rate for the budget? It was about 57, I think. $60. What you call it is, petrol is, fuel is now what? The crude is now 92.
$90 and
$92. We have a windfall. Yes, we have huge debt, which we can use that windfall to probably cushion it. But a certain percentage should go to cushion fuel prices. Because fuel prices hitting 8, it's challenging and difficult. And the frustration that the people go through create the types of comments we see on the media, and something should be done about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jantwa, and I appreciate that you made time for us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Many thanks also to Suleimana Brahma, who is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. I'm Jifa Bampo. We'll be right back after this break. I'll take some of your messages and then we'll tackle what I think is a blot on our conscience.